All right. So the title of this message is called "Consider Your Future." Consider your future. You know, in the book of Lamentations, a book that Jeremiah wrote, he said of Israel, he said that they did not, or she did not, consider her future. And we're going to see how, because they didn't consider their future, how disastrous it was for them. It was disastrous for that entire nation because they didn't consider their future. And so I want you to, I got some questions that I want you guys to think about and answer, if you will. So I want you to imagine or write down in a few words, how would you describe what you hope your life will be like in 5 years? Maybe just write down a few words, or imagine in your mind, if you're not going to write something down, but what do you imagine your life to be like in 5 years? Spiritually, relationally, maybe with your marriage or your kids, financially, or other things in your life. What would you hope or imagine your life to be like in 5 years? Maybe you have some goals, some things you'd like to see in your life. You can keep writing, but what about 10 years? 10 years from now, how old will you be? I'll be 57 in 10 years. Yeah, I'll be 48 soon, almost 50. So yeah, in 10 years I'll be almost 58, almost 60. In 10 years. What do you imagine, or how would you like your life to be? What kind of hopes and dreams do you have? How would you describe your life, what you'd like it to be like in 10 years? Spiritually, relationally, financially, maybe your health, other thoughts and goals that you might have. Hope you're all still here in 10 years. I'm going to stretch you a little bit. What about 20 years? Maybe write down, or just even imagine, what kind of hopes and dreams or goals do you have for your life in 20 years? I'll be almost 70. It's going to be here before you know it. 20 years. What is your life going to be like? You got a picture in your mind, some desires in your heart. So the next question I have is this. So what choices are you making today to ensure that these things will happen? What choices are you making today, I mean in these days, maybe not Sunday today, but what choices are you making to ensure that these things are going to happen? Because they don't just happen by themselves, do they? You have these hopes and dreams and goals and desires. They don't just happen automatically, do they? So what are the choices you're making today to ensure that these things are going to happen? What kind of decisions are you making? What kind of habits do you have? What kind of habits are you developing to make sure that this hope you have for your future is actually going to happen? can be thinking or just writing a few words down. I know I can't give you probably as much time as you maybe want or need, but this might be something you want to expand on at home. But and the last question is, so what are some possible obstacles that could get in the way to mess up your hopes and dreams? These things that you would like to see in your future, spiritually, relationally, financially, whatever it might be. What are some possible obstacles that could get in the way to mess up your hopes and dreams? Because it's good to be aware of those things, because they do come, don't they? They do come in many different forms. Things come into our life that kind of throw us off and affect us. Kind of mess up some of our hopes and dreams sometimes. Sometimes they come from us, sometimes they come from other people. All kinds of stuff. All right, so I'm just curious. Did anybody put down in the future that you hope, like maybe in 5 years from now, you hope to be addicted to drugs? Alcohol? Tobacco? Pornography? Like 5 years, I want to be a porn addict. Did anybody put that? What about in the future, I hope to have an unhappy, distant marriage? Did anybody put that? Don't raise your hand. What about divorced or living in adultery? Did anybody put, in the future, I hope to be really far from God and not going to church anymore? Or maybe 5 years from now, I hope to be at the same place I am today spiritually. Did anybody put that? What about, I hope to have missed some opportunities to share the gospel with my family and friends who have passed away? What about, I hope in the future, I hope to have a bad relationship with my kids? Or maybe my kids are far from God and not serving the Lord. Are those anybody's hopes and dreams for the future? What about for young people? I hope to be failing school or college. Maybe out of college but still living with my parents. Unemployed, not able to get a job. Or at a job I hate or I'm not doing very well. Out of shape and unhealthy. Out of debt, not doing well financially. Are these anybody's hopes and dreams, their goals, desires 5 years from now? 10 years? 20 years? And most of the time we think, these things won't happen to me. But you know what? These things do happen. They're not things that we want. They're not things that we plan for. But they happen. They happen to people just like you and me. They happen. And how do they happen? How do these things happen to normal, ordinary, good people? Well, think about this. Where you're at today, who you are today and where you're at today is the result of all your past decisions that you've made. Isn't that correct? All the choices that you've made in the past make you what you are today and where you're at today. As they say, you're sleeping in the bed that you've made, right? Are you enjoy sleeping in the bed that you've made? Or do you have some regrets? Do you have some things that aren't so pleasant today because of choices that you've made in the past? But just think about this. Today, we're creating our future, right? We're creating our future, who we're going to be, what our life is going to be like, by the small choices that we make every day. Every day. How we spend our time, who we hang out with, what we choose to think about and talk about, how we spend our money, what our priorities are, what our daily habits are. We're creating our future. And it's here before you know it, right? It's here before we know it. And so, it's these small, everyday compromises that bring people to a place of regret. It's the small, everyday compromises that bring people to a place of regret. How many guys know who Ted Bundy is? You guys know who Ted Bundy is? Yeah. Well, Ted Bundy was raised in a Christian home. He was a normal man with hopes and dreams of a good life, and made a bad decision one day. Yeah, it started one day. He made a bad decision, and that led to another bad decision, and the rest is history. I got a short video I just want to show you. If you guys could hit the lights. Yeah, it's about a 4-minute video about Ted Bundy, kind of as part of his last interview.
Dedicated and loving parents, one of 5 brothers and sisters. A home where we as children were the focus of my parents' lives, where we regularly attended church, 2 Christian parents who did not drink, they did not smoke, there was no gambling, there was no physical abuse or fighting in the home. Basically, I was a normal person. I wasn't some guy hanging out in bars or a bum. I wasn't a pervert in the sense that, people look at somebody and say, I know there's something wrong with him, and just tell. I mean, I was essentially a normal person. I had good friends. I led a normal life, except for this one small but very potent, very destructive segment of it that I kept very secret, very close to myself, and didn't let anybody know about it. And part of the shock and horror from my dear friends and family years ago when I was first arrested was that there was no clue. They looked at me and they looked at the all-American boy. And it happened in stages, gradually. It doesn't necessarily, not to me at least, happen overnight. My experience with, I'd say pornography generally, but with pornography that deals on a violent level with sexuality, is that once you become addicted to it, and I look at this as a kind of addiction, like an addiction, you keep craving something which is harder, something which gives you a greater sense of excitement, until you reach the point where the pornography only goes so far. You reach that jumping off point where you begin to wonder if maybe actually doing it will give you that which is beyond just reading about it or looking at it. I'm no social scientist, and I haven't done a survey. I mean, I don't pretend that I know what John Q. Citizen thinks about this. But I've lived in prison for a long time now. And I've met a lot of men who were motivated to commit violence just like me. And without exception, every one of them was deeply involved in pornography, without question, without exception, deeply influenced and consumed by an addiction to pornography. There's no question about it. The FBI's own study on serial homicide shows that the most common interest among serial killers is pornography. Those of us who have been so much influenced by violence in the media, in particular pornographic violence, are not some kinds of inherent monsters. We are your sons and we are your husbands. And we grew up in regular families. And pornography can reach out and snatch a kid out of any house today. He snatched me out of my home. It snatched me out of my home 20, 30 years ago. And as diligent as my parents were. And they were diligent in protecting their children. And as good a Christian home as we had, and we had a wonderful Christian home, there is no protection against the kinds of influences that are loose in a society that tolerates.
Yeah, it's a sad story, but again, there's a normal guy with hopes and dreams, of a good life, and he said that what brought him to the place where he, committed all these crimes started one day choosing to look at pornography. I mean, does that mean that everybody that looks at pornography is going to end up the way he did? Probably not. Is it going to affect you? Yeah, but you don't know to what extent, right? You could end up like him. Could be worse. And that's just one issue. I'm not just talking about pornography, but it's the small compromises that people make every day that bring them to a place where they have regret. I understand that in some of these issues, some of these things that we talked about are beyond our control. Sometimes it's affected by other people. But like he said, it doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen overnight. I was thinking of a pastor who was a pastor at a great church, a big church. His dad was the pastor before him. His grandpa was the pastor before him. Just a great legacy. And then one day, he had an affair. It destroyed his reputation, his life, his legacy, his ministry, and his dad's and his grandpa's. And it's not like he, got up one day and said, "Oh, I think I'm gonna have an affair today." It didn't happen that way. It doesn't happen overnight, right? It happens by the small compromises that people make every day. And it starts very, very, very small in the thoughts, in the minds, and all of a sudden it becomes an action. Well, I'm going to look at pornography, or whatever it might be. I'm going to take a little money, It doesn't belong to me. But Ted Bundy is just one of many examples that we know of people who, were normal people, ended up their future. Man, who would have thought, right? You think Ted Bundy would have thought as a young boy, as a kid, that his life would have been what it became to be? I don't think so. Another example is the nation of Israel, a great nation with great hopes, great dreams, great promises from God of blessing and prosperity. And they were blessed. They were prosperous. They were a powerful nation, close to God. But they started to compromise. They started making compromises that led to another compromise and some bad choices that led to bigger choices that just finally got them to a place where they were very far from God. They were rebellious. And in Lamentations, a book written by Jeremiah, it's probably one of the saddest books in the Bible. The book of Lamentations. It's just sad. If you could put that picture up here, just kind of a picture of Jeremiah is known as the weeping prophet because he wept over the city of Jerusalem. And in Lamentations, it gives this description of Jerusalem before and after. And I just want to read part of that because it's in here where Jeremiah says that, they didn't think about their future. He says, "How deserted lies the city, once so full of people. How like a widow is she, who once was so great among the nations. She who was queen among the provinces has now become a slave. Bitterly she weeps at night. Tears are upon her cheeks. Among all her lovers there is none to comfort her, and all her friends have betrayed her. They have become her enemies. After affliction and harsh labor, Judah has gone into exile. She dwells among the nations, and she finds no resting place. All who pursue her have overtaken her in the midst of her distress. The roads to Zion mourn, for no one comes to her appointed feasts. All her gateways are desolate, her priests groan, her maidens grieve, and she is in bitter anguish. Her foes have become her masters, her enemies are at ease. The Lord has brought her grief because of her many sins. Her children have gone into exile, captives before the foe. All the splendor has departed from the daughter of Zion. Her princes are like deer that find no pasture. In weakness they have fled before the pursuer. In the days of her affliction and wandering, Jerusalem remembers all the treasures that were hers in days of old. When her people fell into enemy hands, there was no one to help her. Her enemies looked at her and laughed at her destruction. Jerusalem has sinned greatly and has so become unclean. All who honored her despise her, for they have seen her nakedness. She herself groans and turns away. Her filthiness clung to her skirts. She did not consider her future. Her fall was astounding, and there was none to comfort her. Look, O Lord, on my affliction, for the enemy has triumphed. It's just a sad picture of what happened to Israel. And Jeremiah says all of this happened because, you know what? She did not consider her future. She didn't think about the decisions that she was making today, how that was going to affect her future. She didn't think about the consequences of her actions. You know, Israel was just living for today. They were enjoying the pleasures of the moment and started to make some small compromises and led to bigger ones. And Jerusalem did not see where they were headed until destruction came upon them. And it's just a sad, sad story. And, you know, unfortunately, this happens to normal people. You know, for me, at the age of 16, I made some decisions in my life that still affect me today. You know, back then I didn't say, I wonder what this is going to cost me. I wonder how this is going to affect my future. I wonder how is this going to affect my future spouse. You think of all the people who are having premarital sex, not even thinking, I wonder how this is going to affect my future spouse. They don't think how that's going to affect their marriage, you know, or if they get an STD or something. That's just one example of many things, choices that people make. They don't think about their future. What about you? So based on the choices that you're making today, what is your future going to look like? Because again, it's your daily decisions, your habits, your routines, your priorities that is actually shaping your future, and it's going to be here before you know it. How do you spend your time, your money? You know, who are you close to? Who is influencing you? How do you spend your time? You know, what do you spend your time thinking about? What are your priorities? How is your relationship with God? People don't end up far from God overnight, right? It just happens slowly, slowly, slowly. Neglect, right? Neglect. Have you become content or complacent? Are you coasting spiritually, just kind of at ease, going through the motions? You know, do you have a passion? Do you have a fire? Do you have a vision to do something for the Lord? Are there any small compromises that you're making? You know, will there be any regrets in your future? So what can we do about it? I mean, what can you do today to ensure that what you hope for is going to happen, your hopes and dreams, and not end up 5 years from now with a lot of regret, 10 years from now with a lot of regret? Because it happens to a lot of people. I have some regrets. And there's decisions, there's choices that I need to make, some changes that I need to make. But I think one of the things we can do is just take time regularly for self-examination. Self-examination, examining our life, our priorities. You know, where is this going to get me? Where am I going to be in 5 years, 10 years? What is my future going to look like? In Psalm 139, verses 23 and 24, it says, "Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. God, see if there's any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting." So we need to come before the Lord and say, God, search my heart, search my life. God, show me, God, the things in my life that are offensive, that are messed up, God, that are going to bring me to a place of regret, that are maybe just a slow road to a place where I'm going to be sorry. So just regular self-examination. Also, to be accountable with another believer. You need to have somebody in your life, another believer, who you can confess your sins to, somebody who can speak to you bluntly and honestly, and someone who can spur you on. You need to be careful about who you're hanging out with. I mean, is it just people who are just consumed with the things of the world? Are they people who are hungry and thirsty after God? People who are spurring you on to something more, getting you out of complacency? In James 5:16 it says, "Therefore confess your sins to each other and pray for each other, so that you may be healed. The prayer of a righteous man is powerful and effective." This isn't a suggestion to confess your sins to each other if you feel like it. It's a command, right? James, he says, confess your sins to each other. Everybody needs somebody to say, hey, you know what? I'm struggling with this issue, this sin. And you need somebody you can open your heart to. Because this is how these things happen. People don't have somebody they can talk to. And you need somebody in your life who can tell you your faults, right? Because sometimes you don't see things. Sometimes you're blinded. Sometimes you have deception. You need somebody in your life who can lovingly say, hey, you're starting to slip a little bit. You're starting to slide a little bit. I see this in your life. And we need to be people who are humble enough to receive that kind of stuff. And I'm blessed to have a few people in my life that have at times said things to me. I'm like, oh, it's kind of a shock, but I trust their friendship. And I'm like, yeah, thank you for saying that. In Proverbs 27:6, it says that wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses. So a true friend might give you some wounds. They might say some things that might have the potential to hurt you, right? But you need to trust them enough to say thank you and appreciate that. You know what? We should appreciate that, the fact that somebody loves us enough to say, hey, I see this in your life, and I just want to give you this word of, I don't know if it'd be encouragement or correction, but a true friend would do that, right? But it says an enemy multiplies kisses. I mean, somebody you think is a friend, and they just keep saying, oh, you're doing great, you're awesome, man, you're just wonderful, and giving you all kinds of kisses. An enemy multiplies kisses. And then Proverbs 27:17 says, as iron sharpens iron, so one man or one person sharpens another. We need some people in our life who can sharpen us, right? Who can spur us on. You don't want somebody who's just going to, let you stay where you're at spiritually. You want to hang around people who want more of God. You want to be around people who, man, they want to be on fire. They want to be passionate. They want to do something for God. They don't want just Christianity as normal, right? They don't want to just go through the motions. Oh, let's go to church today and do our Christian thing and leave the same. During the week, and we need to have relationships with people who are spurring us on, helping us to wake up. Another thing we can do is just to make sure we're guarding our own heart. Guarding our own heart. Being careful about what we watch, what we listen to, what we're allowing into our lives. We need to be careful about that because the Scripture says in Proverbs chapter 4 talks about guarding our heart. I'm just going to read verses 20 through 27. Solomon says, my son, pay attention to what I say. Listen closely to my words. Do not let them out of your sight. Keep them within your heart, for they are life to those who find them. They're health to a man's whole body. Above all else, guard your heart, for it is the wellspring of life. Put away perversity from your mouth. Keep corrupt talk far from your lips. Let your eyes look straight ahead. Fix your gaze directly before you. Make level paths for your feet, and take only ways that are firm. Do not swerve to the right or to the left. Keep your foot from evil. So we need to guard our hearts. Be careful what we're thinking about, where we're allowing our emotions to go. What kind of stuff, what kind of music we're listening to, what we're watching on TV, what we're looking at on the internet. We need to guard our hearts. And another thing we can do is every day, just to seek and pray for wisdom. For wisdom. There's such a need for wisdom today. And, I just encourage you guys to make it a habit of reading the Bible daily, and especially the book of Proverbs. I think there's a reason that there's 31 chapters. I try and do this on a regular basis to try and read a proverb a day. We need wisdom. We need wisdom on how we spend our time, how we spend our money. We need wisdom in our relationships. We need wisdom. And so Proverbs is full of wisdom. In Proverbs 2:12 through 22, it says, speaking about wisdom, it says that wisdom will save you from the ways of wicked men. If you have wisdom, wisdom will save you from the ways of wicked men, from men whose words are perverse, who leave the straight paths to walk in dark ways, who delight in doing wrong and rejoice in the perverseness of evil, whose paths are crooked and who are devious in their ways. It goes on to say it would also save you from the adulteress, from the wayward wife with her seductive words. And it goes on, wisdom will save us from so much destruction. Wisdom will save us from so much destruction in our lives. And it's not just having it in our head. Wisdom is about how we live. And I think another thing, just making the hard choices that need to be made. Making changes in our lives with the help of God and other people. But there's hard choices that need to be made. And for me, man, I need to spend more time fasting and praying. And to me, fasting is a hard choice. Because I love eating. It may not look like it, but I love eating. And fasting is very difficult. But I know it's so good for me. And right now I'm actually fasting Facebook. I actually deleted my account for a while. I felt like it can be such a distraction. Social media, I think some people spend so much time on there, they don't realize what it's going to cost them in their future. The phone. So much time on the phone, so much time on social media. Takes up so much of our life. You know what? I don't miss it. I don't miss Facebook. I don't think I'm missing anything on there that, I don't know. I may get back on there. I miss just having the possibility of just keeping in touch with my family and friends and stuff like that. But we need sometimes to make some hard choices, some tough decisions, and we need self-discipline in our life. We need commitment, and we need to shake off complacency. We need to shake off complacency spiritually, and for me, the only way I know how to do that is through fasting and prayer, and just getting rid of distractions in my life, to shake off complacency spiritually and in our marriages, right? Because in your marriage, you can just go on and on and on and just, things are fine. It just goes complacent. But if we're not improving, if we're not getting better, if we're not getting closer, we're actually going the other way in our relationships, right? And spiritually. So my challenge for you today is to consider your future. What does that mean? Israel did not consider her future. She didn't think about the way she was living, the decisions that she was making, where that was going to bring her in the future. So what is your future going to look like in 5 years? 10 years? 20 years? We need to be careful of those small compromises that we might make, that we might end up in a place of regret, right? So I want to ask you guys to stand. I don't know if the worship team, did you guys have another song? Did you have another one? You did. I thought so. If you guys would stand with me. So consider your future. Encourage you to examine yourself and your life. And what are the decisions that you need to make sure that your hopes and dreams happen, right? And that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, God's will, God's destiny for you is fulfilled. That you don't miss a single thing that God had for you. So let's go to this last worship song. And if you need prayer, I'm up here. If you need prayer, I'd love to pray with you. Yeah, go ahead.